Hi, my name is Dr. Tatiana Astray. I'm the founder of Mastering Leadership Executive Education. A little bit about my background. I've been teaching for over 15 years, and I've been doing exec training for over five. And one of the things I specialize in is negotiations. I actually did my PhD specifically on organization behaviors and really trying to understand what happens when people come together and negotiate, and how can we track the processes that maximize outcome. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to understand your professional relationships and make them a little bit meaningful. And I love this because most of the negotiation out there that you hear maybe in blog, on TV, is not very much based in evidence. Most people need to improve their negotiation tactics. And you know why? Because after a negotiation, rarely does anyone ever come back to you and say, you know what, you caught it, you could have gotten more from me. So we actually rarely have very honest understandings of our skills. So to start it off, I'm going to demystify the process. I'm going to share with you the science and the tactics that separate average versus expert negotiators, and we're going to do it within the trust formula. I love this because I find it very grounding when we think about our relationships and our professional reputation. So I'll give you a moment, very quickly, maybe to the person beside you. What do you think encapsulates trust? What is it? Okay, so we have been studying trust since the 1960s, and now we have thousands of data points from different types of industries at different levels. And trust could be boiled down to credibility times reliability times empathy divided by selfishness. And let me quickly break that down. And then we're going to talk about why it's so important to negotiations. So credibility is, do you have the skill set that you need to get the job done? And the more technical the field, the more important the skill set is. So I'm looking at you guys. Reliability is one of the last things to solidify in your reputation, and it is the ability to deliver on the thing that you say. And the reason why it's the last thing to solidify is that the more complex the industry, the more senior the individual, the harder it is to actually deliver on your results. And so there's a tact that comes with knowing how to promise, when to pull back, and of course, when to speak when you can't deliver. Empathy is like a little secret part that most people forget about. And I mean, I've done training with VPs from a very senior bank, and everyone who did their trust formula, no one realized that empathy was there. Now, empathy is really important because it's the emotional bond of people, and all else being equal, empathy will set you apart. So we can think about if you're choosing between two job candidates that are equally credible, who are you going to choose? The one that you have an emotional connection to, or if you're choosing between two consultants, or maybe even between two dentists, the person with that little extra emotional touch is what sets you apart. And people that are great at their field and at business and at relationships are actually quite tactical in how they build this with the other party. And finally, very important, you can be credible, reliable, empathetic, but if all you do is ever meet your own needs, then people are basically going to trust that you never have their back, and they will not trust you. So typically I will get someone now asking me, is the opposite of selfishness selflessness? And the good news is no. Why? Because selfless people actually don't know how to protect their needs, and they don't know how to protect their teams and the people that they represent. So the opposite of selfishness isn't selflessness. In the business and relationship context, it's actually somebody that can advocate really strongly for their own needs and for other people's needs. And I find this a very liberating idea because the definition of a good relationship, whether we're talking about personal or professional, is the capacity to actually meet each other's needs. And guess what? That's a core foundation of trust. It fundamentally answers the question, do you have my back? And guess what? It's specifically built in very difficult, vulnerable moments. Now, let me give you 4 lessons in thinking this through and why it applies to negotiation. Lesson 1, trust isn't optional. It's the cornerstone of any negotiation where a relationship is on the line. We are social creatures. We evolved to have relationships. And guess what? We evolved to be persuaded by people that we trust. So if you do not trust someone in the negotiation, you will not listen, you will not want to risk take, and you will not actually create really good deals. In fact, you will ignore everything they say and walk away with a terrible outcome. So trust is a necessity. It's foundational. And the other important thing when it comes to trust is that both people's needs have to be met. And this is a very important lesson for the people pleasers in the room because we have science now that says that when you put two people pleasers in the room and they negotiate, they will walk out and say, you know what, we had a wonderful interaction. The problem is they had an easy, simple negotiation, but they typically get terrible outcomes because negotiations actually house the capacity to have difficult conversations. And that actually is what trust is. Can we navigate difficult moments together in a way that meets both our needs? And so if you're a people pleaser, and you're not actually bringing your needs to the table, you haven't tested or actually built the relationship that you need to sustain and create really good outcomes for the both of you. All right, lesson 2. Credibility is not a brag. It's actually an important trust cue that we lay early on in our relationships. So, people that are really nice typically get brought up with this idea that you should be humble and let your actions speak for themselves. However, when we meet someone, the more technical the space, the more important it is to lay down our expertise, our wins, the ways that we actually impact people early on. These are not brags, these are trust cues. And credibility also comes from our ability to ask really good questions. It's not about knowing everything. It's about knowing the confines of the confines of our domain and asking really good questions to facilitate a really great action. So it's really important for you to actually have a really good intro pitch when you meet anyone new and to contextualize those credibility cues to the person in front of you or to the project in front of you or to the service that you're going to provide. Number 3, reliability, while boring, is very important. And this is kind of interesting because sometimes we want to deliver amazing results and we want to overpromise. But the problem when we overpromise, we cannot always actually deliver on that. And through those subtle inability to achieve the things we said we want, we will ruin the relationship. And actually, this is one of the sad ways that people ruin relationships. I call this death by 1,000 cuts. It's not the massive betrayal. It is actually the very subtle not following up on your word, not delivering to the standard that you promised. In this very boring kind of way, we can ruin relationships when we don't speak to the things that we need to. So average negotiators typically are people that make very vague commitments or they overpromise, and experts are really great at creating clear boundaries and creating consistency and also creating qualifiers. So I will do this if this happens, and if not, we will have a contingency plan there. The thing that you're really communicating as an expert negotiator is here's how I can commit and what that's going to look like, and you speak to the things that you can't. Lesson 4, empathy is key. It's strategic. It reduces defensiveness. And what's super interesting, when we look at the difference between average versus expert negotiators come into a negotiation, they think they know, they have tons of assumptions about the interaction, and they're throwing out deal after deal after deal. Expert negotiators do not assume that they know. They've actually taken some time to think about it, but what they do during the large part of the introduction of that interaction is you're testing understanding and you're trying to summarize what you heard. Actually, about 20% of expert behaviors during a negotiation is just asking questions. Now, empathy isn't just like the asking questions, that's a core component, but it's also having your body language match. And this is really important because you're showing interest in the person. And the other thing you're doing that's very strategic is you're listening for things that are important to the counterpart. So that later, when you throw a deal or you make a proposal, you actually know what's going to hit. And another great little tip is when we look at how average negotiators throw out deals, they're constantly throwing out deals. They throw out about 2 to 3 deals per hour. Expert negotiators, about 1 deal per hour. And so when we think about that, there's a power to it. If we're constantly throwing out deals, what we're signaling to the other person is 1, we don't know you well enough, and 2, our deals are going to move. And so it actually primes the other person not to take you seriously. But an expert negotiator listens. and then eventually understands, and then presents something on the table that's actually going to be accepted. And it's a really nice way to do it. Another great quick tip, expert negotiators understand that there's more to win than there is to lose and to walk away. So they know there are points of differences, but they actually understand that coming into business, figuring it out benefits both parties better. Lesson number 5, self-orientation. This part's really important. So again, we don't want to be a people pleaser. We don't want to take advantage of people. We don't ever want to deny ourselves or deny other people. We actually want to be really strong advocates for ourselves and for other people. And this is another core understanding that really separates experts versus average negotiators. When an average negotiator steps into a negotiation or an interaction, they so fear that it's them against someone else that one of their tendencies is to be defensive and to go really hard on their position. And what is that going to do? That's typically going to create a spiral, and it's going to slowly rub at trust. An expert negotiator is actually really focused on the shared outcome because in the process of negotiation, it's not just about coming to a deal. It's actually all about the implementation. So if you think about it, if someone has a negotiation with you, that deal didn't feel really good, you walk away, you're like, I said yes, but I really shouldn't have. I promise you that deal's going to fall through in the implementation phase. That's why expert negotiators aren't just kind, they're actually really strategic and self-interested to create a deal that works for both parties, because those are the deals that last. So when you come to the table, one tip I have is if the person in front of you is very relational, focus on the we. Frame it up in how can we win together? Let me share with you. However, if the person in front of you is a little bit selfish and we're going to go with a little bit more narcissistic, a little bit less interested in you, that's okay. You really care about yourself. You offer nothing that's at your detriment. Everything's about trade-offs, but what you do is you make sure that you use the language of I will help you. By meeting this allows me to do that for you. So the language in which you position your asks is very different, but fundamentally, you always protect your interests and that other person's interest as well. That's core. So, last quick tip that I'm going to throw out there. Really good negotiation strategies. One, always go first. There's a cognitive little tidbit called anchoring and adjustment. We typically want to control the first anchor, but it's because it's really hard to walk away from that, psychologically speaking. 2, never compromise, always trade off. That's really important because compromise actually means that two people do not actually get what they want, if you think about it. If we're constantly compromising on all these little assets or all these little trade-offs here and there, but no one's actually getting what they want, both people walk away unhappy, and that's not the definition of a good deal. But if we trade off on the things that we really care about, we don't get everything that we want, but we get what we actually came to get, then both people walk away really satisfied. And that's a really good negotiation outcome. So I hope kind of putting this together, you think about how do people view you? How are you building trust with your colleagues, with people above you, equal and below, in your personal relationships, in your professional relationships? And I really invite you to think about what is one area where you could strengthen and you could show up a little bit better, and really focus on strengthening that in the next time that you negotiate. And remember, negotiations aren't just about business deals. They're very much about the way we interact, the way we negotiate with our partner about where we go for lunch, the way that we negotiate with our kids about bedtime. And all of that over time adds up to a really satisfying life in our personal life, ideally in our business life as well, but also creates a really good reputation where before you walk in, people say nice things about you, and they say the best thing you could get in business is that person was tough and fair. And they're a pleasure to work with because while they're tough, they will always protect my interests. So with that, I hope it inspires you to show up with a little bit more strategy, but also strategy in a way that really benefits you and the other person. Remember, in life, you don't get what you are worth. you actually get what you negotiate for. And now you have a few extra tools in your toolkit to get what you're actually worth. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and I hope you guys continue developing that skill set.